Hello and welcome to A Bechdel Dysfunction, a podcast that dissects feminist films directed by men and discusses whether they are helpful or harmful. I'm Cara Stromer.
And I am Harry Anderson. We are two film school underachievers who are heaps good at talking about movies but not that flash at making them. We want to acknowledge that we're recording this on Wurundjeri land, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We also extend that to any other First Nations people who may be listening.
This week we're talking about the Australian comedy classic Muriel's Wedding, written and directed by PJ Hogan, starring Toni Collette, Rachel Griffiths and Bill Hunter. I'm not alone. I'm with Muriel.
Okay, Muriel's Wedding from 1994, directed and written by PJ Hogan, starring Toni Collette, Rachel Griffiths and Bill Hunter. A young social outcast steals money from her parents to finance a vacation where she hopes to find happiness and perhaps love. And that is a synopsis from IMDb that gives you no real indication of what this movie is about. Hi, Cara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the 18th time in a row.
It's always a pleasure.
I would like to take this opportunity to grant you full-time residency on A Bechdel Dysfunction.
Now that I know how the grading criteria works,
Yeah, you're in.
I've graduated.
That was your hero's journey. Have you seen this movie before?
Yeah, a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those good ones because it's so culturally prevalent, especially here, but internationally as well. And you remember it for being so funny, which it still is. I rewatched it this week. I still find it as funny as the first time I watched it. But you also it doesn't exist in my brain as like a sad movie. So you're always kind of taken a little back by how serious and sad a lot of the subject matter is, but told in just a really beautiful way. So
yeah,
it's so good.
Yeah, that third act push into melodrama, it always takes me by surprise. I've only seen it twice, and the second time was yesterday. But I think it does that really, really well. I think that's quite hard for comedies to do, to like actually stick that landing. And it's obviously like so side-splittingly funny for the first two acts. And then it's sort of, as soon as Rachel Griffith's character sort of becomes sick, it gets very serious all of a sudden, and you get to know like a lot of the darkness, especially in Muriel. But I think it really sticks that landing, and the melodrama is very powerful. Yeah, it's awesome. It's such an awesome movie. I really feel like this walks so Kath and Kim could run.
Yeah, it's of this unique, I think, kind of Australian type of movie.
Yeah.
And you're right, Kath and Kim's a really good example of it, because I think it's one of those ones where, you know, they're from a sort of small, like, Northern Beaches town, which anyone who's ever been to that area knows straight away. And I think it's very judgmental and it's very harsh, but there's also like that kind of element of like, yeah, but they're our annoying, like, you know, There's a certain kind of like sort of love and ownership of it.
Yeah. I think there's a certain amount of shitting in the tent as well. It's just like, there's a certain awareness of Australians making fun of other Australians.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. I also think this movie doesn't actually punch down that much. And I think that's why it's kind of successful.
Yeah.
Because it's not particularly cruel. Like there's cruelness that happens within the film in a comedic sense, but I don't think it doesn't seem to be that cruel. It seems all the sort of the hardships that happen in it seem to be there to evoke empathy. But you look, we're getting the cart before the horse. There's
we'll get to
getting into the themes way too hard too quickly. What makes this a feminist film, in your opinion?
I think really comes down to the strength of the Muriel character, that this is a really solid sort of, maybe it's a bit too late in the age, but like a coming of age movie or a like self-actualization movie for a young woman, instead of might more typically see it in a sort of man genre, and to have a character who's so fully realized on the page, like as written, and then so fully realized by the amazing performance by Toni Collette, to just kind of see that amazing character growth, I think.
Fuck, she's good. She's just really, really great. I think there's a lot of amazing contorted face acting in this film. There's a lot of people just like, really, really leaning into it, especially that group of girls.
There's a really good like screenshot of at the end when the main sort of bitchy one is like I'm beautiful. And her face is just in this like snarl. Like it's amazing. But Toni Collette's just got this really kind of plastic, like malleable face, and she just is very expressive. It's really strong.
Yeah, and you're in her shoes straight away. Like as soon like the bouquet scene right at the start, as soon as she grabs it and the other girls start picking on her, you're automatically sort of like in her boat and like on her side, and you're just riding the bumps with her, and she's so lovable. And like you say, so much of that is just connected with Toni Collette's performance. So. And I think probably the most relatable thing about it all is that I think we've all been that person at some point. Like we've all been that weird outsider who isn't comfortable with who they are, and the idea of escapism, whether it be to like some tropical island or to Sydney or changing your name.
Or getting married.
Yeah. Just like Muriel's character sort of finds out these kind of superficial things that don't actually change anything. We've all thought about them as like a magic potion, but I guess the strength of the movie is that she sort of gets through that and is out the other side and sort of becomes her own person by the end of it, by staying true to herself.
And I think the other part that I find so strong about it is sort of how, and it's kind of annoying, like almost a cliche to say now, like a flawed character, but like she really is like, and the movie doesn't shy away from any of her more negative traits and the destructive things that she's doing, but also builds up this foundation as to why, and you can really empathize with her like level of insecurity and her issues and why she's doing these things, so that, and in that way she manages to stay likable and really compelling to watch. Yeah, it's so good. I can't imagine there's anyone who would listen to it who hasn't seen it. I remember like one particular viewing. It was the AFL Grand Final, GWS versus Richmond, I think, like the most boring one of recent memory.
Yeah.
And we're at my house, and and then somebody was like, "Oh, we're gonna go to the bar in Footscray." And I'm like, "Yeah, I will meet you there." And I had gotten all ready and stuff, and then I was like, "Oh, Muriel's wedding's on," and I sat down for 10 minutes, and I was like, "I'm not getting up again." I was like, messaged my friend, like, "Sorry."
The power of PJ Hogan. I don't blame you. I mean, it is such a great movie with so many incredible moments in it. Do you have a specific favorite moment in this film?
I'm not alone. I'm with Muriel. I love that. I love the so much of the Rachel Griffith stuff. The Waterloo talent show.
Yeah. The arm movements in that alone are just outstanding.
But even that in her performance, I kind of hadn't noticed before until I was watching it maybe a bit more seriously this time, like the difference in their like level of confidence. Like Rachel Griffiths is just Rhonda's just, she's just there, she's just feeling it, she's having a good time, she's not embarrassed. And you can really see the difference in Muriel of how like robotic she is at the start before she kind of eases into it. And it's just like the strength of both their performances, but particularly Toni Collette's, that you can see the change happening and it doesn't feel fake. It's like you can just recognize she's embarrassed, she's like feeling insecure about, you know, the whole thing. And then as her confidence grows, you watch it. It's so strong. Yeah.
And then, the simultaneous shit going down with the girls.
With the fight. Those four girls, I was going to talk about them a bit eventually, but I kind of not feel sorry for them exactly, but they're also for really strong performances and really
Shout
funny.
Out to Sophie Lee in particular.
And Ros Hammond, who I remember from, she was in stuff like The Librarians and stuff like that. She pops up in a lot of sitcoms recently. Like they kind of have the unfortunate thing of being like the bitchy girls in Muriel's Wedding, but they're also like really good in this. Actually, I think like all the performances are really good.
Yeah. Like, big time. I really love when Muriel gets back with her date in the beanbag.
The beanbag.
Yeah, I'm a parking inspector. And also just Toni Collette's squeal. Amazing. Such an honest little screech. And she's so incredibly lovable in that scene. Well, the whole thing, but in particular, to see the character of Muriel just brimming with unbridled joy.
Yeah.
It's so fucking awesome.
That scene is really good. I was thinking of watching it when I was watching it. It kind of made me think of in Thelma and Louise when, like, after Thelma sleeps with Brad Pitt, like that, like really nice kind of sense of excitement that she has. I was kind of feel, and it's it's a shame how it turns out.
Yeah,
it's a good little.
Girl's got to get laid.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean how it turns out for Muriel. It's like, but yeah, that's a really cute scene as well. I'm trying to think of some others. I like the wedding as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the wedding's a really good example of like hilarious and then also heartbreaking with Rachel Griffiths and also with the mum I'll talk about Betty for a bit.
Let's talk PJ Hogan. What do you know about him? What other PJ Hogan movies have you seen?
I've seen a few. So this was a kind of surprise hit. Did really well internationally distributed
Which
by
kind
Miramax.
of blows my mind personally. I always it really weirds me out when international audiences like sort of vibe with colloquial Australia because it feels so alien, or maybe we just think it's alien. I don't know. Like, but yeah, it went to Cannes, it went to Toronto, like it was massive.
Got picked up by Miramax. Which I only noticed because I was looking through the production list to try and see our friend's mum, who was the accountant on this movie. That's how small like the Australia is. It's like,
there's 8 people. So.
Yeah, they'll be talking about Muriel's wedding and your friend will be like, oh yeah, my mum was the accountant on that movie. And my dad was on Whispering Jack. And then I noticed at the very bottom there was like assistant to Mr. Weinstein, and I was like, well, that's weird. But anyway, it doesn't matter. PJ Hogan after this did My Best Friend's Wedding, which is, I think, a kind of interesting film. I quite like it, but it's kind of I think it's got a sort of parallel to this movie in that I can't remember her name, but Julia Roberts' character in that is almost like the villain and the protagonist. Like she's the one trying to end a relationship in that movie and trying to sabotage your wedding to basically get what she wants, and she doesn't even really know what she wants. So, but just it's kind of manages to carry it through, her realization journey, and also just through Julia Roberts being really charismatic. What are some of his other ones? I've seen Confessions of a Shopaholic, but I don't really remember anything about it.
Have you seen The Dressmaker?
I have seen The Dressmaker, which he wrote and was directed by his wife, and I was going to talk about, but his wife, Jocelyn Moorhouse, who is the producer of Muriel's Wedding, and they seem to work really closely together on lots of their projects. So it wouldn't surprise me if she kind of had a hand in developing like a lot of the direction of this movie, and that they would work collaboratively on that kind of thing. So yeah, are you up with PJ?
Not at all, really. I've seen like the first 20 minutes of My Best Friend's Wedding. I've seen this. I guess a couple of other notable ones he's made. Like you said, Confessions of a Shopaholic from 2009. Peter Pan, 2003.
Oh, yeah. I was a big Peter Pan fan. When
I kind of remember that coming out, but obviously I haven't seen it.
I watched it a lot.
Yeah? Is it good?
Yeah, it's, it's pretty good.
I heard it had critical acclaim, but box office failure.
Well, not at my local video store.
Awesome. But yeah, I mean, he seems like an interesting cat. Like, born in Brisbane, grew up on the North Coast where this is set. And it seems a fair bit of this is kind of autobiographical. Like, he grew up in a house where his dad was running for the local council and his mum had a nervous breakdown, not dissimilar to the mother character in this. And the rhetoric was like she was shipped away, like sent somewhere else, like because it was bad for his dad's image whilst running for local office. So yeah, and I think he had a few issues like being bullied growing up. Like, so I think he is an outsider. Like, obviously everyone deals with bullying to a degree, but for whatever reason, that kind of translates in this film. Like, he obviously grew up in a regional place wanting to escape in the same way that Muriel sort of does. So I think that sort of translates in this. Would you agree? Does that sort of check out?
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that sort of Muriel's actions of like stealing the money and running away to Sydney as things that his sister did, but he based the personality on himself. And I found that really interesting. And I think it's why she's so well written. But I just found it really interesting because I couldn't kind of think of another example of a time when a man writing a film would choose to kind of do this autobiographical, but have himself be like a woman instead, and just choose to make that change, not for any kind of like pretentious or like stupid reason. It's just like, oh, this is just a story that I had, and then I was kind of infusing myself into it, and I was just like, yeah, that's really. I just thought that was kind of cool, actually.
Yeah,
because a lot of the time you might actually see the reverse of like women writing men characters that way, and it's a pretty sort of unfortunate trope that men writing women just aren't really capable of writing women with like subjectivity.
Yeah.
And PJ Hoagland just seems to be a really good example of a man who can. So good for him.
Yeah, and he seems to really have his finger on the pulse. I think that really cuts through in the scene in the bridal shop where Rachel Griffiths' character sort of confronts Muriel, who's been going around to these various bridal shops in Sydney and just like having some sort of made up story ready so she can try on all these dresses and have photos taken of her to fill up her scrapbook. And Rachel Griffiths catches her in the moment, sort of confronts her, and there's that huge breakdown where Muriel is like, I just don't want to really be myself, essentially. And I think it's pretty clear that his finger is on the pulse.
I love that scene so much. And I think...
And it has so much potential to not work as well. I think that's the most amazing thing about it. It could totally fucking bomb. But yeah, I was tearing up at the first one.
I don't know. You can get into it too much, but I also really love this movie just because I personally, and I know kind of everyone to an extent feels this, but I personally relate to Muriel so much. Like her insecurity, her experience of not exactly being an outsider, but knowing that you don't fit in and you're sort of not gelling quite properly, which again, I know everyone kind of feels these things. And like the retreat into fantasy, like I've never fixated on marriage, but the retreat into a fantasy world to like cope with the fact that you don't like your life or who you are. It's just so, and to have it kind of just, I can't remember the exact dialogue that she says, but to have it just verbalized that way of like, because if I can get married, I won't be me. I'll be somebody who somebody wants to marry. Like, it's just so like incisive and it really cuts through. And it's like, you know, where I am now after a lot of work on myself, I can kind of see it on the other side of that, which is really good. But it's so like it hits me very deeply.
For sure. And I think this movie is so good at setting up that whole like meeting of the goddess thing, where it's just like it's made out for 2/3 of the movie. Like this is all that she needs to get, and she'll be happy. It hits that very serious punch when there's sort of the reveal is like you're not happy because you got what you thought was going to make you happy. You sort of have to reconcile with what's within, and that resolves itself very beautifully in the final act when she sort of goes back to Pauper Spit after her mum passes away.
When people talk about it, we always sort of talk about how funny it is, and the first things you'll kind of hear about it are like the memey stuff, like "You're terrible, Muriel," and the ABBA stuff, and all of that. But
what a coincidence!
But I kind of remember when I first watched it, and I was like to my mom, I was like, I didn't realize it was going to be so sad, and she's like, oh yeah, it's terrible with the mother stuff. But I guess to like kind of fill in the plot a little bit of, Muriel's father is a local councilman who's had previously run for state politics and stuff.
Missed out on by 14 votes because of the postal vote. But you can't stop progress.
You can't stop progress. It's clear that he feels this resentment towards his family as they're not up to scratch and they're the reason that he didn't win, and like we're very dismissive of everyone around him, including his wife, who he's having an affair, and they end up separating. And there's a scene with Muriel's wedding, which is in Sydney. It's this big deal, and he has to get a bus and a taxi there. And the wedding starts without her, and then she's waiting at the end of the aisle, and Muriel like doesn't even acknowledge her as she's walking out. Like, it's just heartbreaking. and then she has an incident of shoplifting.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just find it so, is her name Jeannie Drynan? Her performance is just so amazing of this woman who's just
so detached
and so like so fragile and so like disassociated from what's happening, and then just eventually coming into this really strong feeling. Yeah, it's so sad. I don't know how to articulate better than that, other than
that representation of women, sort of that particular age bracket in movies of this time. I don't know, that perhaps like the first wave of like boomer housewives who are just, I don't know. I feel like this character pops up a lot. Like, I feel like I know this character quite well. Yeah. Would you agree? Like, someone who's sort of just like now middle-aged and has sort of lived through, in a lot of ways, all that they're going to live through, and they're kind of just like waiting out their days. Like, there's a certain sadness to it all. And
I think it's kind of if you talk about how insecure Muriel is, to bring it back to Betty, it's like, if your whole life has been being this man's wife and like raising his family, and if at the end of it he's not satisfied with the job that you've done and he's gonna leave you now, like, you raised 4, 5, how many kids they've got, and they're all lazy and worthless and they don't reflect well on me, so now I'm gonna leave you. Like, that's so devastating if that's kind of been your whole purpose up to that point,
or what society is sort of
framed. I mean,
like,
I don't
in the same way that Muriel wants a wedding, like this perfect life. I sort of get the feeling that her mum was like, in a way, like was promised a similar sort of thing. You know, when she was growing up, like, oh, if you get married and you have a family, like, you'll be worthy of status, and in the community you'll be accepted and loved and considered to be an object of desire or whatever. But, you know, once you're at the other side of it, which Muriel gets to herself, it's sort of like this cold, brutal realization that, like, these status symbols mean nothing. And
I think
anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
I think it's also just, I mean, I didn't sort of mean that as like that's all it was for, but if you're in that situation and you believe that in yourself, like, I love this man and his success and happiness is my success and happiness, and I failed in that, like, I think it's unfortunate you're in that situation to begin with, but like when that's sort of internalized in you and what you believe, like, to have that taken away and to have all the work and effort that you've done to just be thrown aside of, well, it didn't scratch up, so fuck you, got mine.
Yeah,
it's like,
and then she dies.
Yeah. I mean, the scene where she's like yelling at Perry about like mowing the lawn and like you're embarrassed, and when he's like, you're the embarrassment.
Shout out to Dan Wiley, you're coming up later on. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Also, the performance at the end with the sister, when she goes into Joni's room, because Joni's the one who found the mum. I thought, like, that's so fun, and like it's so just well performed.
It's so believable.
Yeah.
And like, I know it's kind of colloquial and tongue in cheek, but what this film does well, and I think there's a handful of a couple of great Australian films that I think a lot of people can resonate with, where like they know everyone in this film. Like, this is definitely one of them. And for me, Animal Kingdom is another one of them. I don't know if you've
I haven't seen it.
Oh man, like it'll flip you the fuck out. That's like one of the best movies of all time. But yeah, like that, and like Lantana, like these, and like further down the comedic scale, something like The Castle. Shout out to
she's the daughter
Kerrigan, who marries Eric Bana.
Yeah. Oh, what do you know?
Staple, absolute fucking staple of Australian cinema. Anyway, but like, yeah, the familiarity of like these sort of people who like you've known your entire life, and you just like, oh, that's so and so, and like,
and even like I remember I did this course on Australian cinema, and I do think it is important, because even just being it's filmed in Tweed Heads, like recognizing, you know, that those kind of houses and like those kind of backyards and those kind of restaurants and, you know, those kind of tropical resort, like just having that, like, yeah, I've been to one of those. Like,
and also just that representation as well. Just like, yeah, that's the big thing I think I've learned throughout all of this, is like the importance of representation and not to take that for granted, because people want to be seen, and you don't always see these kinds of people, these sort of like lower middle economic sort of status people represented in cinema, let alone Australian cinema. So it's fucking awesome.
I mean, when you talk about recognizing, there's that bit where he's looking through the photo album.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it was literally like could have been my family's photo album. It's literally like there's this picture of the mum. And it doesn't make me think of a photo of my mum exactly, but I just kind of know there would be a photo of my mum that would look exactly like that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's so emotional.
Those ones cut through, especially because it has so much personality in it. And obviously the performance from, what's the actress's name again?
Jeannie Drynan.
Her performance is obviously so muted and spacey and not particularly emotive. So when you have like this one still shot in this...
But she's so happy.
Yeah, and you're just like, wow, like... That's a great example of show don't tell.
Yeah.
And this movie's covered in it. I think it's aged incredibly well. I think...
Yeah, so do I.
For me, there weren't too many moments of cringe. And there's... Yeah, like I sort of said at the start, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it doesn't punch down to anyone. All the punching down is contained within the film for Muriel's character growth. But I don't think it's judging anyone in particular. Like, everyone is sort of held... I don't know, it's a fairly even level playing field. Like, there's a few... Like, you laugh at the South African swimmer a little bit.
Yeah.
Or, like, you know, like, the bitchy girls. But, like, even still, it's like...
I think my thing, I agree. Because my thing with the bitchy girls, right, is I think everyone's got that person in their life. And like the person who for me was the bitchy girl has their own bitchy girl. You know, I mean, everyone at various
awful sentence. I'm sorry for starting it as well. But yeah.
I was gonna kind of mention this and it's like and you will probably be that person to somebody else. So it's not about like in terms of like I was thinking about talking about that maybe it's a bit harsh on those girls and like they're all pretty like one-dimensional and whatever. And I'm all about exploring perspectives and whatever and what have you. But I think that their function in the story is something like that is a role that everyone kind of has in their life. Like hopefully not to the extent, you know. But actually, I don't even know that they're kind of like they do. I mean, it's a pretty cruel thing to like just tell people you don't want them around anymore.
Yeah, amazing scene as well.
But also, they did have her around. Like it's kind of. You know, and it's not very nice to like try and, you know, change people and force them to be. But there's an extent to which it's kind of a mutual, like Muriel wants to be like them and that's why she keeps hanging around them. But she can't be because she's not. She's not really who she is. And she has to kind of have that moment. So like it's cruel, but it's also.
It's necessary.
Yeah. And people kind of come and go out of your life and. You can probably find better ways of doing it than that. Yeah.
I think in some way, shape or form, we kind of all need to be bullied to learn sometimes, I think. Like, I don't want to elicit cruelty on anyone. I don't want to, like, encourage people to go and bully other people. But, like, I think there's a lot to be learned from being in a position that Muriel was in. Obviously, it's super extreme, like having a group of friends saying, hey, you can't fucking hang out with us anymore. And I can't say I've ever experienced that, and I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, it is the catalyst for her growth. Like, if that doesn't happen, the movie doesn't really happen.
Yeah, and I think that the cruelty is kind of... It's not... I actually wouldn't necessarily even call them that cruel in that scene to Muriel directly. It's more of a disregard for her feelings because they do at least kind of come in with this like gently like, oh, let her finish her orgasm. Like they do sort of kind of try to break it gently to her and it's just that they're like unable to kind of connect with her and realize what a devastating thing that would be, that they kind of brush her feelings aside once Sophie Lee starts crying. And then it kind of escalates. And then it's also like the thing is you got to consider like it escalates on the trip.
Yeah.
But it kind of would. If you told someone you don't really want to keep hanging out with them and then they were there,
Yeah.
Like, how else are you going to read that? I mean, but like, you don't have to resort to the sort of things that we're actually crueler to each other. They're cheating on each other and like having physical fights with each other. Yeah. I just sort of, I was just sort of trying to say that, and I don't mean for this movie specifically, I kind of mean it with like, I always found teen movies and stuff with cliques and stuff kind of unrelatable because I'm like, wasn't really in a clique, and I don't really think the people around me were in cliques in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I just kind of recognize that for every person who is like, you know, the archetypal like Regina George or whatever, like Regina George doesn't exist. She's not a real person. So for everyone who represents that in your life, in their life, they'll have one as well.
Yeah.
And you will be one to somebody else without even knowing it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I think it's really well represented and it sort of comes full circle by the end of the film. It is such a like a small town mentality sort of thing. And it's easier when there's less people around as well.
Yeah.
That's why that sort of stuff exists in high schools where you have like the clique of like the cool kids or whatever. But I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, and it's so important when Muriel gets around the other side of it and she sort of just sees them for who they are, and they are just like a group of girls who are going to be stuck in this time warp for possibly their entire lives in this tiny little town where they're the top of whatever pecking order that they consider to be important to them because it's kind of all that they have.
Yeah.
And there's a deep, deep sadness in that as well. So that's just like a huge cathartic thought for all the nerds out there. It's just like anyone who's fucking punching down to you is punching down because they're a big fish in a small fucking pond and they're a hurt person. And hurt people hurt people.
I don't know. Hopefully you can cut that into something coherent.
Always do.
Okay.
I was just going to say one other thing as well. There's two scenes in the movie where Toni Collette ugly cries.
Yeah.
And one of them is played for laughs and the other is like dead serious, and she's kind of doing the same thing in both and owns them for their own like pillars of strength that they are. So there is that scene when like the group of girls tell her that you can't hang around with us anymore, and she does that full like seal cry. Amazing, like it's properly amazing. And then does the same thing later on when she finds out her mum dies when she's with the South African swimmer. Can't remember his name. I like how he says Kieran Perkins. But yeah, and she's kind of doing like that same sort of silent cry. And both of them work perfectly in their context. And I think that's just a great sign of this film being able to make that shift into melodrama and make it work. Because that's so hard. Like, so hard for 2/3 of a movie to say, I'm not taking myself seriously, and then being like, we're serious now, and it still works. Like, you very rarely get that. And that's just like such masterful filmmaking.
I think it's so successful because it's kind of, even though the first like half or 2/3 is lighter, it's doing the groundwork. Mm-hmm. You know, they're setting up the affair, but in a jokey way. Deidre Chambers, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
And they're sort of setting up, you know, because you've got the mum sort of just constantly dissociating in the background and all that kind of thing. So the undercurrent is kind of there. So, but in a very subtle way. So once it turns to pushing to the front, I don't think it feels like too much of a leap because you've already got that groundwork laid out.
All right,
which is just a success of PJ Hogan's writing.
100%. I want to move into the fun stuff, but I know you mentioned one cringy thing that you wanted to bring up.
The only thing I found that I was kind of like, oh, maybe you could have toned that down a little bit is it's at the end when Tanya's getting back with Chuck.
Just a beautiful sentence.
Tanya's getting back with Chuck. And he's in jail right now because he's been accused of raping a Japanese tourist, but he'd never do that because he hates the Japanese. And I just kind of found that to be a little bit too flippant, a little bit too callous, a little bit too leaning into misogyny and racism and ambivalence about sexual violence. I just kind of thought...
Well, there hadn't been any of that in the previous 100 minutes.
Yeah, so I just kind of felt like that was kind of the only moment that made me go, ooh.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think...
It's golden.
I couldn't really think of anything else that I found particularly...
Yeah, you got to be better than that, Hoax. All right, it's time for Sexy Lamp. you know what it is. If you can replace a character in your film with a sexy lamp, it'll make no difference to the plot themes or story. You are a hack. Cara, who's your sexy lamp?
This is an easy one.
Go.
It's the South African swimmer. David Van Arkel.
Yes, Arkel.
Because he's literally, that's what he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's the mannequin in her fantasy wedding. He's the Ken doll. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because she just wants to be married.
Yeah.
And it's nice because they managed to develop a bit of a sort of a little bit of a sincere little
I wouldn't mind having you hanging around.
blossoming of a romance. But yeah, he's the classic sexy lamp.
Yeah. I had two. That he crossed my mind for sure, but I had two others which I think are fairly solid as well. Dan Wiley, who plays Perry, who after her brother Perry, he would go on to be like a fairly consistent Australian character actor. He's in shitloads of stuff.
I'm trying to think of what I might have seen him in. Keep talking.
He's in Underbelly. He's in Animal Kingdom. He's in...
I haven't seen it. He was in Spotswood.
Yeah. But you know his face, right?
Yeah, I did know his face.
But yeah, it's sort of like just an early role for him.
Oh, he was in Peter Pan.
But yeah, I just thought, just because he was, I know, after the fact now, 30 years later, that he's quite a talented character actor and he's just sort of playing this bit part, not doing too much, just has a few lines here and there. I just thought he'd be a bit of an honourable mention for Sexy Lamp. But my one that I'm going to double down on is going to be Bryce.
Okay.
Played by Matt Day. Because his character arc is completely unresolved and it's quite funny. He's just there at the wedding.
He's just there at the wedding looking sad.
Yeah. It's very funny.
I'm like, why are you there?
Yeah. Because but
he's cute.
Oh, yeah. He's a parking inspector. That's all right. Also, when she's making tea for him and they're just fucking in the other room, like Rhonda's fucking the two sailors, and she's just like, Bickies? Killed me. Absolutely killed me.
It's so good.
Yeah. It's awesome. But yeah, my thing, I had it in my mind that I thought that David Van Arkel, the swimmer, was gay. And I had this complete made up scene in my head, like when they go back to his flat, he has a male partner there. And I was just like, I guess I made that up. But I thought that might have been good if that happened. But anyway, and that's why he needed a wife rather than just citizenship sort of thing. And I thought that would have been another layer of people projecting. But anyway, sorry, I'm a better writer than you, hosts. Chill out, mate. But yeah, and I thought that my rom-com sensibilities had it in my mind. Like, oh yeah, she's probably just going to get with Bryce at the end. But I really like that she doesn't. And it's just her and Rhonda on their way back to Sydney and they're just starting their new life, warts and all, but stronger for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just, that's kind of what it is. It's being able to and it's a very literal version. Most of us won't get to do this in real life. You just have to do it psychologically. But being able to let go of wanting to achieve that fantasy version of yourself and just accepting who you are, but also recognizing that you can improve and you can change your circumstances and you can, grow as a person and you can seek happiness without desperately chasing to just be somebody else. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's well-rounded. It's aged incredibly well. Well-rounded, like a shaved head on top of the body of Jason Statham. Yes, it's time for Statham swap out. Each week, Cara and I get to swap out one character each from the film that we're reviewing to be played by Jason Statham. Cara, who is your Statham swap out for this week?
There are so many that would be good.
Oh, yeah.
But I went...
Have you got a list?
No, I just went with... Literally, I hadn't even decided one. I was just looking at the character list, who would I go for? And I've got one.
Yeah, go.
Diane the store detective.
Good.
Is that the wedding?
Yeah.
Is that at his cousin's wedding?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's another, just the store detective is another example of just the really good writing in this movie. Because it's such a random thing to happen, to have a store detective at a wedding and grab you for shoplifting a dress a few days earlier that you've worn to the wedding. But so that's such a random thing to happen. And you kind of, but it's also really, you know, good at establishing sort of Muriel's family's position in the community and like her awkwardness and her, you know, struggles with money and her insecurity. And like, it's such a good establishing thing to happen, but it's also so fucking random.
Yeah.
But then it also manages to come back in the third act when Muriel's mum's kind of having sort of a mental breakdown basically and randomly decides to steal a pair of shoes and she gets caught again by Jason Statham.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's my one.
I had Tanya.
Yeah, Tanya was one of mine.
I'm beautiful.
I'm a bride. He couldn't get it up, so like, and there was lipstick on it.
There was lipstick on his cock. Yeah, look, I wouldn't have swapped Jason Statham out for this performance, but I also just wanted to say that I really like Bill Hunter as a dad. He's fucking great.
Bill Hunter, right, who's sort of to me an undersung like a gay Australian icon because he's in this.
He's in Priscilla?
He's in Priscilla and he's in Strictly Ballroom.
Yeah.
And it's like just 3 classics of camp Australiana and Bill Hunter's there doing his thing.
Also, shout out to Goose from Mad Max, who's the swimming coach.
Is he?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
I'm pretty sure it is. I'm going to double down on that if anyone knows otherwise. No, it is him. It's fucking Goose, man.
Yeah, no, Bill Hunter, he's great and everything and
just great facial expressions. Like when he's walking her down the aisle and he's all like stoic and all yours, mate. Where's Charlie Chan with that food?
Deirdre Chambers. What a coincidence.
Deirdre Chambers is a great name as well.
Yeah, it's very...
Like that's such a classic role in these sorts of films, like regional town and just like this like hoity-toity lady who thinks she's just not very country at all. It just has this like pseudo-European projection. Like I know those people and I just fucking love that in this.
Yeah, no, he's excellent. Because again with Bill Hunter as well, and it comes to that third act when, you know, the facades all start breaking down. Like, you know, he gets the telegram from Bob and Hazel.
Yeah. He's turning around in the funeral. Yeah, that's so good.
But
I've still got friends.
Yeah. But he's created this like image of himself and it's all just starting to crumble and it's like, oh, you have to just be like a real parent now.
Yeah. On the doll.
And take responsibility. And he just plays that and it's really in his last scene, he just sort of becomes fully realized as like a recognizable human person. It's before he's been a caricature. So it's really strong. You know, like his first scene in Strictly Ballroom is just like this extreme close up that zooms out just of like his mouth.
I haven't seen Strictly Ballroom, so
you gotta.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I love it. Every time I watch it, I'm like, this is so fucking good.
Yeah.
I think it's Baz Luhrmann's best movie.
Yeah, me too. Even though I haven't seen it in ages, but I like Moulin Rouge a lot.
Oh yeah, true. Anyway, sorry.
Besides the point, rest in peace, Big Bad Billy Hunter.
Oh yeah, true.
He's been dead for quite some time. I think.
Has he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry.
One of the greats. One of the great voiceover actors as well.
I saw him on Specs and Specs once, so I assumed he must still be going. But that show's also been over for a long time.
Right before he passed away, he was in this AFL ad for like the 150 years of AFL football, doing like an armchair thing where it's just like talking about the history of football. That was like completely fabricated.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, so good. Let's get into our grading criteria. We do this every week. We grade the film that we're reviewing with these 3 main criteria. 1, does it Fight Club? 2, does it Bechdel? And 3, does she make it? Cara, does this film Fight Club?
I don't think so.
And just to reiterate, Fight Club means the film has a reverse effect of what the filmmaker intended. I guess it'd be very hard unless someone's watching this to like... I don't really laugh at someone suffering, but
I don't think that it can because it's sort of For me, it's kind of feminist potential is all quite subtle, and it's mostly just in the fact that it isn't such a a well-rounded woman character. So because it's just such a personal journey of one person's, growth, it's pretty hard to Fight Club that unless you think, no, women should all be insecure and live in small towns.
Yeah. Bloody oath.
Yeah, other than that.
You can't stop progress. Well, you can stop progress if you do that. Cool. Yeah, I don't think it Fight Club's either. 2 points. There you go. Does it Bechdel? Cara, can you reach behind you and just grab that book out from underneath that book? That's the Feminist Film Guide. I hold in my hot little hand the Feminist Film Guide by Mallory Andrews, or Mallory Andrews, as I said in the very first episode. The Bechdel tests. The film has to have at least 2 named women in it who talk to each other about something besides a man. I feel like that happens in this.
Yep, definitely.
Let's see if it's actually in here, because usually I look to see if the film's in here.
Well, it definitely should be, because they at the very least talk about, Rhonda's cancer diagnosis and her recovery and where they're going to live and all that kind of thing. And
I'm going to lose my hair.
And about their we haven't even really talked about Rhonda. Like,
do you want to talk? Because fucking hell, like Rachel Griffiths is unreal.
Rhonda is like just everyone needs a Rhonda in their life, like
a sunrise. Double Rhonda. Keep going. Sorry, I derailed.
No, I just Rachel Griffiths, another amazing performance, and to go from somebody who's so confident and like vivacious and energetic and like extroverted and proactive and just the perfect kind of person to bring Muriel out of her shell. It's unfortunate that Muriel feels the need to kind of lie to her so much, but their friendship does eventually recover from that. And to then kind of, portray like the shock and the fear of a young person getting a cancer diagnosis like that and then losing use of their legs. Like, I just think she does it so well, like that very human anger and resentment and this kind of grief for like this huge change in your life, but also like by the end of it, determination to like, move forward. It's just like, again, like I feel like because it's Muriel's story and it's about Muriel and there are parts of Rhonda that's a little bit underdeveloped, but you still kind of get that full turnaround just in Rachel Griffiths' performance. It's really strong. Yeah.
You can't come in here and start threatening brides. I don't care how unfortunate you are. Fuck off. It's one of the best fuck offs ever. I also like that when she goes back to Porpoise Spit, she has like shit mum hair.
Yeah.
She's like completely like reverted back to regional life. Like the cool, like wet punk look is gone. And she's just like, I have been domesticated. I am oppressed by the system. Just a quick one. It's not in the Feminist Film Guide, but Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is from the same year. What a year for Australian film.
I wouldn't even know what the character, what does it have for Priscilla? I'll just have a look at that just for my own reading.
Yeah, we can put this on the Patreon. That's a joke. We don't have a Patreon. Does she make it?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I think it's the strongest she makes it of anything we've watched.
They both make it. Full marks, 6 out of 6.
Because it's another thing I want to say about her making it, because a lot of sort of fuss in the movie and also in like the material around the movie about the fact that Toni Collette gained weight for this role, and there's a lot of commentary made about Muriel being overweight. And we love to say that this is not a weight loss journey. She doesn't really make any attempts during the movie at all to lose weight. She just kind of becomes more confident and just starts dressing a bit better. And there's no, like a lot of these things, especially, maybe not so much in the past 10 years, but definitely before that, there would be a weight loss connection to the improvement of, self-confidence and
a Bette Midler type situation.
And happiness. And we love to say that isn't in this movie. Mm-hmm. And Muriel, her and Hunky David do have sex in the end. And she doesn't, that you don't have to go through these huge changes to be like desired, we love to see it.
She bones that sexy lamb.
She does.
And she doesn't need to change who she is.
And then she leaves him after.
Yeah, it's a big power move.
It really was.
Yeah.
It's fucking great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's awesome. So I think this question's going to answer itself, but do you think this film is helpful or harmful?
I think it's helpful.
Fuck oath, dog.
I think I don't have much or any detractions from it. I think it's really good if you're, as a viewer, if you're in a situation similar to Muriel's, or if you're coming out after that, or even if you're not, just to help you empathize with other people who maybe are. I just think it's an amazing introspective character piece, and it's also hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also
It fucking rocks, man.
Deirdre Chambers.
What a coincidence. Yeah. Boy's dead out from China. Awesome. Yeah. Resounding success. What an incredible film to finish on. Let's get meta for a second. This is going to be our last episode for the year. We may or may not be back in the new year. We haven't decided yet. Y'all can deal with that. But I guess we can just talk about the journey that we've been on, our very own journey from Pauper Spit to Sydney, metaphorically, and off on our own. I got nothing. I can't.
Well, let me tell you something.
Yeah, please.
Before I started doing this podcast, I used to listen to ABBA every day. And now, since I've started doing it, I haven't listened to ABBA once. Because now my life's better than an ABBA song. It's not as good as Dancing Queen, but it's better than like Honey Honey.
Yeah, great. That's so nice. I know you're quoting the movie, but yeah, how do you feel after having done 18 episodes of a podcast?
It's
Cool.
hard for me to say because I don't listen to it back, so I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, rather than the experience of just putting stuff out there in general, like, what's your biggest takeaway at the back end of this? Like, has this in any way, shape, or form changed the way that you view films?
Okay. It's something that I've been trying to do, because I fell into this pattern that became a real big like online thing to just kind of criticize and critique things to death. Mm. And I hope that that isn't something that we've done, and that people would appreciate that we're always trying to find and draw out whatever good things that we can, while, creating a context of what things might need improvement and what people can learn from. Mm-hmm. I think that's my biggest thing that I think that we have done, and I think that we've gotten better at it as we've been doing this, of always trying to meet the films that we're watching at their level and try and at least understand what the intentions are and be sympathetic and generous to what the men creators of these works are, mm-hmm. and try and understand what their intentions are and interpret them with that in mind, while also acknowledging that when it's missed the mark and what can be improved. And mm-hmm. yeah,
for sure.
I don't know.
No,
if that made sense.
I think that's good. I think one of the best things that I've been able to do whilst doing all of these episodes is just kind of open my eyes a little bit more and learn new ways and sort of understand the importance of representation, I guess. That's the main thing. And just become more empathetic to viewers other than myself and people in my demographic, and sort of broaden my horizons in the hope of, I don't know, I can't say that what we're doing is bettering people, but at least having an understanding of how storytelling can be beneficial in people's lives, I guess. I don't know, and sort of dissecting stuff that hits the mark and doesn't hit the mark. I think that's been very important for me, and having more or less taking a listening role to you and being able to hear what you have to say and taking in what you're saying, and just being a more empathetic viewer of films and understanding broader ranges of stories to connect with people. Because I think at the end of the day, that's kind of the main thing. All these movies are out to try and connect with people. And the more people you can connect with, I think the more at peace you can generally be in your life. And I feel like I'm a little bit more peaceful as a result of doing all of this. So this is a backhand way of me saying thank you for you passing along your wisdom. Because I think in a lot of ways I kind of always adopted that I was going to take a fairly passive role in this and just be the person like asking questions, steering the ship and like taking from your knowledge. I don't know if you've noticed that at all, but that's what I've been doing for 18 episodes.
Yeah, but you've also had good things to say. Like, I think your opinions are very valid.
Yeah, chime in every now and again.
I think also I remember once somebody, every person who kind of studies film and every person who studies like film theory will kind of get this about it not being important. And this experience for me has really just reminded me how important that it is, because almost everyone watches movies.
Mm-hmm.
They're so much a part of our culture and they reflect so much about how we feel about things and can, like, it's a two-way street, right? Like, it's a conversation of how the culture at large thinks about things and how it's feeding back into it. So it is important to understand and to be able to watch things and understand, like, where is this coming from and do I kind of agree with this?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing I would just tackle in the end there.
Yeah, for sure.
But you're very welcome for my wisdom.
No worries.
You experience my wisdom all the time.
I do, but I feel the pressure to listen when we have microphones pointed at our faces.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. But yeah, and I guess I hope I've been at least a good vessel for male listeners as well. I think that's kind of the main thing, just the importance of sometimes being passive and just listening to women or woman being you in this situation, and just the importance of listening and not having to speak all the time and not having to speak for women, which I think definitely some of the male directors in the films that we've reviewed have done.
But thankfully not all.
Yeah, exactly. And it, like you say, it is very much a two-way street. So I think I've enjoyed listening and learning and sort of opening my eyes to some things that I've been a bit tone deaf to. And just in the hope of being a better feminist. And I hope that some other guys have been able to join me passively as I've been that sort of vessel to potentially improve your own lives and be more empathetic and be able to connect to women in your life and listen to their stories and understand where they're at. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Probably
maybe
not.
Or maybe we can do it me. We can do a nice hate listen and just get angry at everything that we say, and that's your prerogative.
That's a big win.
That's a listen on Spotify.
I remember saying that to you, like when we were first sort of coming up with the concepts for this, and you're like, "What if people hate it?" And I'm like, "That's the main point. we want to get those fucking people, because that's how you know you're doing your job right." But yeah. Anyway, just something to think about. Anything else you want to say before I sign this off?
Anyone who's listened, thanks for listening. Hope you like it.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
I know there've been a few long doggos, but yeah, really appreciate it. And if you somehow made the journey over from TikTok without there being a link on TikTok and you've just started listening to this out of fucking nowhere, I thank you. Thank you for taking the time for typing in something on a different app. Yeah, you're the real hero.
That's all.
That's it.
That's all, folks.
That just about does it for another episode of A Bechdel Dysfunction, a podcast that dissects feminist films directed by men and discusses whether they are helpful or harmful. Deidre Chambers, what a coincidence!
I was just about to say it.